My name is Hannah, and this is my year of less stuff. Hey y'all, welcome to the fourth video in my 4-video series. I promise. I will of course link the first 3 videos down below, but if for some reason you don't want to watch them, here's the short story. I have always really loved beautiful things, and I've always been prone to overspend on them, but I haven't always been deep into the beauty community or into makeup in the way that I am now. I started watching YouTube videos about beauty products in 2016, and my Sephora spending really ramped up. Then in the year of 2017, I was either going to Sephora or placing an order from Sephora on average at least once a week, and it added up to a crazy amount of money. The year of 2018 was my no-buy year, so I stopped cold turkey, I cut my behaviors off at the pass, and I started a YouTube channel that was documenting the progress of that year and just discussing beauty products and how much I love them. My no-buy year really helped me change my behavior. I stuck to my rules, and in short, it worked. So I came out of my no-buy year and I started a strict beauty budget. And over the past year and a half, I've just been really careful. I've been tracking the things that I buy. I've been paying attention to how much I'm spending and how many things I'm acquiring. I feel like I've changed so much, both in terms of how much I buy and how much I spend, and in terms of what I feel about buying stuff, my emotional relationship with shopping. I've changed so much that that person that I saw through the evidence of my 2017 spending is almost unrecognizable to me. And going through the list of the things that I purchased that year, and also going through the experience of responding and reacting to it on camera, brought up a lot of questions. So the comment sections on those 3 videos were full of questions from you guys. I decided to compile them into a list of the most asked questions and film a Q&A style video about this project. If this happens to be your first time to my channel, welcome, I'm Hannah. I'm so glad you're here. As I already indicated in this introduction, I love beautiful things passionately, but I have a troubled history with shopping. So here on my channel, I celebrate the value that beauty can add to our lives, but without normalizing overspending. So if that kind of content sounds good to you, I hope you will subscribe. Let's go ahead and get into the meat of the video. I'm here at the beginning of the video and I'm worried that I don't have the fortitude to do these questions justice. I think I need to hold Sadie, BRB. Something really funny happened with Sadie last night. She was looking out the window and suddenly she got really scared and her tail got all puffed up and her whole body got all puffed up. And that doesn't usually happen to her. And we were like, what is it? We were like, what could possibly be out there that scared her so much? And we went and peeped it, and it was a baby deer. Obviously the deer is a lot bigger than Sadie, so I understand why she was like, what the butt is that? But a deer is like the opposite of a predator, and Sadie herself is such a predator that it cracked me up. Okay, I'm covered with cat hair and properly fortified. Let's begin. The first question on the list is, was it some sort of binge or manic episode? So many of you in the comments postulated that I had had some sort of mental break from reality, some sort of psychosis that was driving me to behave in this way, to buy so much stuff and keep going back to Sephora so many times every month. Was it some sort of binge or manic episode? No, girl, no, it was not. It was just highly addictive behavior to me that I was engaging in repeatedly. You don't have to be psychotic in some way or be having some sort of manic episode to fail to resist, to engage repeatedly in addictive behavior. Towards the end of my most recent video, which was the one about makeup and shame, I got into talking about why I think the purchase of cosmetics is such a compelling candidate for obsessive, self-soothing behavior. There is something about the purchase of makeup and skincare specifically that makes it applicable as a medicine for all manner of woes, especially woes that have to do with one's sense of self. So I didn't do that thing I was hoping to do. I didn't get that thing I was hoping to get. achieve that thing I was hoping to achieve. I'm not turning out to be the person that I thought that I would turn out to be, but skincare will somehow get me closer to my ideal version of myself. Makeup will somehow get me closer to my ideal version of myself. My goals for myself are many. I have many goals for myself that have nothing to do with makeup, that have nothing to do, frankly, with the way that I look at all. But I also have goals for myself that do have to do with the way that I present to the world, the body that I'm in, the face that I have. So those things are all intertwined and dovetailed. And when I let myself down, or when life lets me down in a bunch of ways that have nothing to do with makeup, those other things that do have to do with the way that I present to the world, if I can lift them up by buying and wearing makeup, it's like I feel like at least I'm not falling off completely. At least I feel like I'm not falling off the edge of the world. Makeup is also beautiful. It is so attractive to touch, to swatch, to apply to the face. It's so tactily satisfying. And the combination of all those factors is what made shopping at Sephora so addictive for me. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that in 2017, when I was spending all of that money at Sephora, buying all of that stuff, I was in my right mind. It's just that shopping for beauty products was my drug of choice when it came to making myself feel better. And if shopping for beauty products has never been your drug of choice for making yourself feel better, I can understand why it might have been kind of hard to fathom. So I understand where those comments were coming from, but no, it was just for some reasons that I'll get into, it was really the ideal thing for me at the time for self-soothing. And so I just kept going back and kept going back. Question number 2, what was the emotional and mental context of this year? So I was just talking about the fact that buying makeup, shopping at Sephora, shopping in general was my drug of choice at that time for making myself feel better. But that kind of begs the question, well, why were you feeling so bad all the time? So bad that you had to go every week, sometimes twice a week, to engage in this drug of choice activity? And the answer is, it's complicated. I feel like I could make a whole video, I could write a whole essay just answering this question, and then I still wouldn't have exhausted it. I still wouldn't have fully answered it. So I'm going to just kind of like briefly move through a little bit of a list off the top of my head to give you the general idea that I think many of you didn't have when you were watching those videos, the general idea of the context that you were asking for in those comments. I feel like there are 3 levels to the context of that year. On the surface, there's like the circumstantial context, like what was going on in the world, what was going on in life, in my life, what was kind of going on in my inner life, because it was that time in history. So I'll talk about that. The next level down is like the cyclical level, which is just like behavior leading to behavior, the feeling of being stuck, the hamster wheel aspect of what was going on. And then the fundamental level is just the existing conditions of society that I was in then, that I've always been in, that I'm still in now, that can lead to this sort of thing. Let's start with the circumstances, the top level, because they are directly relevant to my relationship with YouTube. The end of 2016 was a very dark, a supremely dark time for me and for many people. The election of our current president took place at the end of that year. I hesitate to get too much into talking politics or like unpacking my feelings around that election on this channel, not because I don't want you guys to know or because I'm not forthcoming about that kind of thing, but because in my experience, that is one of the things that can incur the nastiest, the most vitriolic and upsetting kinds of comments. So without going into specifics about the character or the actions of any given politician, or my feelings about the details of any given political career, I will say this. We have had 45 male presidents in this country, 45 men, and more than half of us are women. There is something tremendously, egregiously wrong with that. How are we to be expected to fully conceive of ourselves as leaders, to fully know our power? How are we to expect men to fully conceive of us as leaders, to fully know our power to lead, if we're getting this message that when it comes to leading the country, only men will do. I feel like it's not in vogue these days to talk about how incredibly overdue we are for a woman president in this country and how incredibly important it will be. It will actually, when it happens, give strength to women, internal strength. Give them power, give them agency, and it will give men new lenses through which to see women. It isn't just symbolic. It won't just be an ideological win when we have a woman president. In my opinion, it will actually change lives. It will change things. This is all just to say that a large part of my mental and emotional context at the end of 2016, beginning of 2017, had to do with the fact that I had really high hopes that that change might start. I think perhaps you could say it's an issue of my imagination being too good, but I had allowed myself to fantasize about what it would mean. I'd allowed myself to put myself in that headspace of going forth from that election to live in a world in which our president was a woman. I had made myself raw. I had exposed my sense of self to that hope. Oh, brother, we're only on question 2 and I'm already ruining my eye makeup by tearing up. But you guys know what happened. Those hopes were slapped down so painfully, given the person to whom she lost. I felt like I had been poisoned. I felt like the hope that was running in my veins like turned to poison. Oh my goodness, it was almost 4 years ago and I'm still like this. You can imagine how affected I was at the time. What I'm trying to say is that I felt at that time like all of my worst fears about the way in which my gender was going to keep me from achieving what I want to achieve in this life, all of those fears had just been confirmed. That is what it felt like. And I felt like there was nothing that I could do about that. I felt disenfranchised, nullified, over. I felt over. So that was the first layer of context, the unusual circumstantial context of that time in my life. The next layer down, the cyclical stuff, is just about the fact that I was already a habitual shopper. I already loved to buy beautiful things. I had come to anticipate a dopamine response from the purchase of something beautiful, makeup, clothes, body care, etc., housewares, art, just anything. I was already a person who had a strong relationship with shopping. By the end of 2016, by the time this circumstantial context was in place, I was already indoctrinated into the cult of consumerism. I had been indoctrinated into it, I think you could claim, since I was a child. I already knew that this was a thing that would make me feel good. I also already felt bad about buying too much stuff. I had felt bad my whole life about how much I loved buying beautiful things and how much I spent on them. So there was already this kind of feedback loop of expecting it to make me feel good, having it make me feel good, and then later feeling shame, and then being driven by that shame as I was driven by all negative emotions to shop in order to quell it. And then the fundamental context, the societal context, just has to do with the fact that I never felt like my best self my whole life. I always felt too big, too blotchy, too goose pimply, too hairy, too smelly. I had never felt like the right kind of woman. I had never felt like I was beautiful on my own. It's really hard to feel that way, especially as a woman in America. I think it's hard to feel that way in a lot of societies right now. We are born into a culture that trains us to feel like there's something wrong with us. So I had spent my whole life feeling like I needed to do better at fixing all of the stuff that was wrong with me. And buying cosmetics is one of the things that makes a person feel like she is on that path towards being fixed. In the darkest days after the election, when I really didn't know what to do with myself, that was when I started watching YouTube. I was just looking for something. I was looking for some way to keep thinking about shopping, even though I wasn't at the mall, even though I wasn't actually physically shopping. And I searched and I came across Jaclyn Hill's channel and I started watching beauty videos on YouTube. I had never really watched them before, maybe a tutorial here and there, but I had never really been a viewing part of the beauty community. I didn't even really know that it existed. Like, I didn't know who Jaclyn Hill was before I went searching for some videos about makeup to watch while I was in the bath, just feeling really bad about the entire world. They were interesting enough to engage me. They gripped something in me, this part of me that really wanted to learn how to wear makeup better, that really wanted to know about all of the different kinds of makeup. They gripped me and engaged me. And it was hard to find anything at that time that would grip me and engage me. Everything just felt like garbage, like paper dust and garbage. And so to find this genre of videos that tapped into something that was available for tapping, this makeup thing, this part of me that wanted to buy makeup, it was like a godsend. I was like, oh my gosh, finally, like something that I can watch, something that will like keep me alive, right? So that was the emotional and mental context. I'll briefly let you know about the just general circumstances of that time in my life as well. I was in my third year in my graduate school program. The program that I went to is the Helen Zell Writers Program at the University of Michigan. It's wonderful because it's fully funded. It was an amazing opportunity. I went there to get my master's in poetry, my MFA. A fully funded master's degree program, in this case, a fully funded fellowship, meant that I didn't have to pay, obviously, to attend the school. So the fees of being a student in that program were all covered, but I was also being given a living stipend. So the idea was that since I had gotten into the program, I should be able to come to Ann Arbor and attend the program and pay my rent and buy my food and just generally take care of myself without going into any kind of debt. As part of the program, as part of the fellowship, I did do some labor for the school, some work for the school when I was a graduate student. I taught undergraduate classes, but the program only lasted 2 years. So for 2 years, I was in classes, I was teaching classes, and then I graduated. There was an amazing opportunity, though, attached to this exact program, this MFA program, which was a third year with an extension of the fellowship funds, but without having to attend or teach classes. So for the first part of 2017, pretty much the months that the first video in the series covered, I was living in Ann Arbor, receiving this stipend from the university and working on my manuscript. Joe and I were also running Poema, our clothing business, during that time. We were running it out of the house that we lived in Ann Arbor while I was pursuing my master's degree. And I did discuss this a little bit in those 3 videos talking about what I purchased, but about a third of the way through the year, we moved to LA and I no longer had that stipend. So when I had that stipend, it wasn't like I had a bunch of extra money because we were renting a whole house and we were running the business. There were a lot of expenses involved in that entire way of living, but I definitely had a lot more spending money, a lot more wiggle room than I had after we moved to LA when we were just depending on the business to pay for our rent and our bills and all of our food and to cover its own expenses as well. So that brings us to our next question, which is how could you afford it? A lot of people wanted to know how I was able to afford to be such a rabid overspender at Sephora in the year of 2017, or whether I actually couldn't afford it and I was putting it on credit cards, etc. I kind of gave you a general sense just now, and then the answer is a little bit messy, but I'll do my best to be more specific. So when I was at the university running my business with Joe and also receiving this stipend for living, I couldn't have made it without the stipend. Our expenses were such that I needed to spend much of my stipend every month on food and on other living expenses, but I didn't need to spend all of it. I could have saved some of it. There was definitely extra between the business and the part of the stipend that I spent. Everything on groceries and living expenses, everything was covered. There was always extra. The responsible thing to do would have been to put that extra in my savings account. And sometimes I did do that. I was always sort of trying to make a general effort. I also earned a little bit of extra income in the last year because my writing won some prizes. There was some endowed competitions, like writing competitions as part of the university. And because I was in the master's degree program, I was able to submit my work to them. I won some of those prizes and I received some windfalls of money because there were cash prizes attached to winning the competition. And the responsible thing to do with that money would have been to put it in my savings. Again, because we were running this business, we were able to cover our rent. I didn't need it right at that moment. So that's what I did. I would sometimes put some of my stipend into my savings, and when I won those prizes, I put the prize money into savings. And then I proceeded to buy all of this stuff at Sephora with my credit card because I would run out of money every month, and then I would keep spending and I would go into credit card debt. I would get myself into credit card debt for like $1,000, $2,000, and then I would dip into my savings to bail myself out. That was what I was doing that entire year. And I did it without looking at how much was left in my savings. And this brings me to the answer to another question that some of you asked, which was, how did you get out of it? Like, how did you decide to do your no buy year? How did you convince yourself? The moment for me was the moment when I realized that I had drained my entire savings account, because I knew how much was in there. I had won these prizes. I thought I was like doing the smart thing by saving it. And then I kept dipping into it and dipping into it and dipping into it to pay off my credit card. And for some reason that felt better than it would have felt to have all of the money in my checking account to just spend it all. Because I wasn't paying attention, I always just thought that there was plenty left. And towards the end of 2017, I looked into that savings account and I realized that I had spent it all. It was drained. It was like a couple $100s left of an amount that I was so fortunate to have won from these prizes. And if I had saved it or invested it or something, it could have really meant something. It could have really changed my life. But I spent all of it that year just bailing myself out of credit card debt. And I think that the reason that I allowed myself to get into the credit card debt was because I knew that that savings account was there as a fail-safe. Ugh, that stuff that I just told you, that's some of the hardest stuff I've ever gotten out here on my channel. That I was such a little idiot. I was such an idiot. I'm trying not to like say those things about myself. I am trying to understand and forgive and be gentle to myself. But when I think about the way that it went down with my finances and how delusional I was and what I could have done if I hadn't spent all that money, ugh, it's yucky. It's just like hard. Moving on to the real tea. This was the most asked question. How did you hide it from the people in your life? What did Joe think? I did not actively hide it from the people in my life. It's just nobody was paying attention. Like nobody really thought about Sephora. Nobody I know really gets it. I don't have people in my life who could have like looked at all of the Sephora bags in the corner of my apartment or looked at the boxes that were coming to my house and understood what that must mean in terms of money. Joe, least of all. Joe doesn't know anything about makeup. He doesn't know how much stuff at Sephora costs. And he's also not one to question my judgment. He doesn't get into my business. He lets me just make my own choices, and he trusts that I'm making good ones. Or at least that if I'm making bad ones, that I will be responsible for checking myself before I wreck myself and figuring out what I need to do to change my behavior. We are very close. We live with each other. We know a lot about each other, but we don't police each other. I think that if I were ever exhibiting a truly destructive behavior, like the kind of behavior from which we know as a society, and Joe specifically also knows, that it's very difficult for a person to extract herself, if I were exhibiting a behavior from which he believed that I genuinely needed help extracting myself, he would intervene. You know, if I became like an alcoholic, or if I developed an eating disorder and he could clearly see that I had a disorder, or if I was diagnosed with a disorder or with an addiction. I'm not saying that if that happened, then he and the other people in my life would just leave me to deal with it on my own. No, they would intervene, they would help. But my shopping behavior in 2017 didn't look like that to anyone. It didn't even look like that to me. So how was Joe expected to see what was going on? How are my friends or my family members who didn't even live in the same city as me be expected to perceive the problem? It was hidden from everyone, but not because I was trying to hide it. I never hid. I never like hid my Sephora bags when I came home from the mall, or hid the boxes when they came in the mail. I never did that. It hid itself, because it just seemed kind of innocuous to be buying some makeup, to be interested in beautiful things, to be refreshing one's wardrobe. Nobody can see from the outside the extent of it. And even Joe, who was kind of on the inside, who could see the extent of it in terms of material goods, he doesn't have the knowledge about the industry to be able to look at that and extrapolate about the extent of the financial damage. And he didn't mistrust me. He doesn't mistrust me enough to think that maybe he should have done those calculations and tried to find out. And frankly, I appreciate that about him. I'm glad that he's that way. I'm glad that he trusts me. Obviously, I had a big problem in this case, and I don't know how I would have reacted if Joe had sat me down and been like, I think that this is a real problem. We need to talk. I don't know how I would have reacted. I probably would have been like, yeah, I know, and then broke down crying. But I don't know where it would have led in terms of me finding a way to make myself better. I don't know if it would have ushered the no buy year in earlier or anything like that. I don't know. What did happen was that I did take myself in hand eventually. I guess I do wish that someone had taken me in hand, or that I had taken myself in hand before I drained my savings account of that windfall money that I was able to save because of being lucky enough to attend this funded MFA program and being lucky enough to win some of those prizes. Of course, I wish that the change had happened before all of that money was spent. But I don't know if it could have happened at someone else's hand. I don't think that Joe could have saved me, or that a family member could have made me stop buying makeup. I think that I had to be the one to do it. A lot of you wanted to know what my Sephora spending has been like since 2017. So what was it like during my no-buy year? What was it like last year and this year? And if you watched my no-buy year videos, then you'll know that my spending at Sephora during my no-buy year was actually kind of an unexpected roller coaster ride. So I was on a replacements only no-buy, which meant that I was allowed to replace staple items when they ran out. So when I ran out of shampoo completely, I was allowed to buy one shampoo. When I ran out of vitamin C serum, I was allowed to buy one vitamin C serum to replace it. But as you'll know, if you watched those videos about what I was buying in 2017, the products that I considered to be my staple products were a great many very expensive skincare products. And so when I got into my no-buy year and I started replacing them, and many of them just would last 1 month. It would be like a $60 jar of night cream that just lasts a month, an $80 vitamin C serum that just lasts 2.5 months. So by the time I got halfway through the year, I had replaced these $40, $60, $80, $150 skincare products so many times, and I had replaced so many of them that I had already made VIB Rouge. I was halfway through my no-buy year and had already spent $1,000 at Sephora. That was a huge wake-up call to me, because I thought that my problem spending was just coming from indulging in things that I didn't really need. I thought that if I narrowed it down to just the necessities, that my spending would be reasonable. Making VIB Rouge in just 6 months on a replacements only no-buy made me realize that the problem was deeper than that. The problem was that I was buying products that I couldn't afford. In the light of that information, I revolutionized my skincare routine. I kicked out every single product and replaced it with a much less expensive version of itself. I basically built an ingredients-based skincare routine rather than a best of the best or luxury brands-based skincare routine. And the skincare routine videos that I filmed about 6 months ago, I have a morning skincare routine and an evening skincare routine. That's pretty much what I'm still using. I also have a video that I filmed more recently about what I would be using, what my skincare routine would be if I were starting over from scratch and buying everything myself. And I will put all of those in the description box down below, because I've been getting a lot of questions about skincare lately. Those 3 videos are really everything you need to know. It would be redundant for me to film another one right now. Anyway, because I did that, because I switched out all of my expensive products, I didn't end up spending that much more than that $1,000 for the second half of my no-buy year. I think I came in at something like $1,500 or under $1,500 for the year. Some of those replacements, I continued to buy them as I was looking for something better, so I didn't completely stop. But my replacements only no-buy cost me about, let's say, about $1,400 or $1,500 at Sephora, which is totally ridiculous. But I was on the path, and I was at the beginning of the path at that time, right? The no-buy year was just the beginning of the path. So I understand why I had to go through this period of only a slight reduction in my spending at Sephora in order to get to where I went next. which was last year. And I pulled it up on my computer. It's still in the records. My yearly spend at Sephora for 2019 was $442. I lost my VIB Rouge status last year at Sephora, and I'm no longer VIB Rouge this year. I should also say that I think at least a third of my yearly spend at Sephora last year, if not close to half of it, is accounted for by gifts, because I purchased like a care package from Sephora as a birthday gift for each of my cousins last year. And I think I spent over $100 on each of them. So that's $200 right there. That's already almost half of the 442. And I know that those aren't the only gifts I bought at Sephora last year. So I think that my personal spending at Sephora last year was probably something around $200 or $250. And scrolling up to this year, it's actually shaping up to be higher this year than it was last year. Although I have no plans to make VIB Rouge again, ever again. I've already spent $385 at Sephora this year. And it's high because of all of those self-sponsored reviews. So the Becca highlighter, the Rowan quad, the Fenty blushes, a lot of the stuff that I have purchased with my channel budget for review, I've purchased from Sephora. So the second to last question is, how much did you spend on other things? How bad was it altogether? So people want to know how my shopping behavior was when it came to clothes, when it came to body care and accessories and homewares. And I will tell you, it was bad all across the board. I love fashion as much as I love makeup, and I was as compulsive about buying clothing and accessories as I was about buying makeup. I think that in 2017, my focus had newly shifted to makeup in a way that it had never shifted before. So because I had that newly forged relationship with beauty YouTube, I was particularly prone to buy makeup during that time because I already had a closet, like I already had beautiful clothes. I was much further along in my understanding of what kinds of clothes look good on me, what I like to wear, what kind of style I want to build with my wardrobe. I was much further along in my understanding of that than I was with my understanding of makeup. So makeup felt like this brave new world to me, and that's part of why I spent so much specifically at Sephora that year, because it was like this new exciting hobby. But I continued to buy clothes and shoes and all that stuff during that year. I was also a total lushie. Every time I went to the mall to buy something at Sephora, I would always go to Lush as well, and I rarely got out of Lush without spending like between $60 and $100. So it was really bad. And the other things that I bought, it was for the same reasons. I think that some of you wanted to hear me talk about my emotional experience buying clothes, or the sort of the mental trenches that caused me to buy other things like bags and shoes and body products, because I tend to focus so much on cosmetics. But it's the same. Everything that I said at the beginning of the video about my identity as a woman, my fears for my wings being clipped by this unequal misogynistic society that we live in, my sense of fundamentally being inadequate, the sense that I'm a work in progress, that there's something wrong with me, that I need to spend money to make myself into an adequate woman. That applies across all categories. It's not just makeup. I found makeup uniquely seductive in 2017, but I think that clothes and body care and shoes can be equally seductive for all of the same reasons, depending on who you are. And the final question is the one that I think that I'm going to have the hardest time answering. It's how have you dealt with the guilt and shame? People want to know. And I did just film that makeup and shame video, so there might be some windows into the answer to this question in that video. I've also been recently referencing the fact that I am doing work on self-forgiveness and just trying to let it go. I don't, though, feel like I have any pearls of wisdom about this. I feel like for me, the truest answer is time and having changed my behavior. I would not have been able to film these videos during my no-buy year, right? So 2017, spent all this money, bought all this stuff. 2018, started my no-buy year. I was doing well on my no-buy year. I was changing my behavior. I was making progress. I was learning stuff about myself, but it was just too fresh. Knowing how much I had spent at Sephora the year before, that number was just too fresh and raw. And even though I was in the middle of making change, I was too ashamed to talk about it then. So it wasn't just starting the no-buy year and making an effort at change that helped me to not feel so bad I still felt really, really, really bad, really guilty about having spent all that money during my no buy year. After my no buy year, I continue to feel really bad about it. But as time has gone on, and I have continued down the path of change, and my behavior has continued to improve, and I've seen myself sometimes being drawn back into the old behavior and spending more than I meant to, like I did at the beginning of this year. But then I've seen myself bail myself out of that emotionally and behaviorally. And I also know that I have measures in place that will keep those moments from damaging my financial health in the long term. So, what I mean by that specifically is that at the beginning of this year, I overspent for the first couple of months, but I know that I can refrain from spending very much for most of the rest of the year, thereby balancing it out. And so I've neutralized it. I've made it so that it's not something that's going to haunt me next year. The more times I go through something like that, the more I reinforce the fact that I'm now in control for myself, the more able I am to let go of the guilt and the shame. So I hope that that will help some of you who are maybe at the beginning of your rehabilitation journey. If you have just started to make a change, or if you're about to start to make a change, if you're about to start a no buy year or about to go onto a strict budget or something, and you're just racked with guilt and shame, and you're just like, when are these feelings going to go away? And if you're feeling like you can't start your no buy until you have some sense that you're actually going to feel better, or maybe you did start your no buy but you don't feel better yet, and you're like, what use is this if I'm still feeling so guilty and horrible? Just know that it will come with time. Your ability to forgive yourself and to be kind to yourself will come with time, but you have to stick to it. During that time, you have to continue to prove to yourself over and over again that you are going forward on the path and that you will not go back. And that is it. I'm spent. I'm done. I've answered all of the questions on my list, and I hope that it was sufficient for you. If you have more questions that I didn't answer, just let me know down below. I don't know if I can make another video like this, but I can try to incorporate answers to those questions into future content. I really appreciate you guys being here. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was enjoyable. And I hope that you are remembering to take extra good care of yourself right now so that you can be the most effective version of yourself as you do your work in the world.